Good morning once again. I just finished those two improvisation piano playings. They both had a painting display. One was Goldilocks, and the other one was two skaters on gold. So I think that's a new direction. I'm going to do that because I have a lot of paintings, so I could do a lot of these before everybody gets tired of it. But I also have been doing a lot of improvisation, so I can marry these two, the painting and the improv. And the improv is fun, so it's a win-win, really. And I just want to point out, you see up here, this painting right there. It's got blue in it and what have you. You blow it up and look at it. That's a painting I did, and it's supposed to be Joan of Arc. So you may like to look at that, Joan of Arc. Now, that being said, I am about to do another World History for Ordinary People. This is going to be World History for Ordinary People 38. But it also has a new wrinkle. I'm going to start, after the number, I'm going to start putting a one or two word description of what's in the world history video. Because now it's getting to be a large number. There's like 38, and people can't, if they're looking for something, they're not going to want to open 38 videos and see if that's the one. So I'm going to call this one World History for Ordinary People 38 India. And I'd like to point out that 37 and 36 and maybe 35 are also about India. Now I could probably go in there and rename them because I have done that once, but I've forgotten the steps. And so I'm just going to leave that as is. I've made a statement. Perhaps people will be looking at 38 and they'll see India, they'll open it up, and they'll find right here in the beginning of the discussion that 37 and 36 are also about India. And that was the main reason why I wanted to do a video today, was to air this new way of naming the videos. In other words, if I do one on say Africa, I might say, World History 38, 39, Africa. So, but this is India, and really I haven't read much since the last one, but I think there's a couple of good items that I'd like to put out there on India. So back once again, considering we're in ancient India, and we're having first of all, let me tell you, their family structure was such that there were large numbers of people considered to be part of a family and all living within a single compound. There were the father, the mother, the children, cousins, perhaps some aunts and uncles, maybe on the side of the father. There were servants and slaves. There were certain workmen that were only doing work for this family. They all would be grouped in this compound. They didn't call it a compound, I don't know what they called it, but it was a separate section of the community, of the larger community. But you could actually think of this family unit as a community with its own administration, its own management, its own methods of production, just as if it was a small village. And to me, that's one advantage of living like this, because people get to be something. When I was raising my children, I felt that the government had taken any authority I may have thought I had out of my hands. So, whether that was true or not, or maybe I was just hallucinating, I don't know. But the point is, in ancient India, the fathers had authority. Now, most times, it was authority dealt with a tender hand. So it wasn't that they were beating their children or anything like that. As a matter of fact, it was considered bad form to have any physical administration of discipline on children. So I'm saying this, and I didn't mean to mention it, but it's important to realize that these ancient Indian families were actually a bigger unit than we can imagine a family today. You know, everything is the nuclear family. That name came out in the hippie era, nuclear family. And, you know, where are the grandparents and the uncles when you need them today? You know, some people are lucky they have that grandparent around to help them all the time, and some people aren't. But that's the way they did in India a long time ago. And reading about the domestic life of ancient India, a couple of little things struck me as more interesting than others, and only for the fact that they underscore that much of religious rites and rituals, even of the modern times, but certainly, you know, since there were religions of the modern era in the Western world, some of these rituals date back to ancient India, and I'll name two. One is during their wedding feast, their wedding ceremony. The married couple would have rice thrown on them, and I think this maybe they say rice and other herbs, but obviously that was a tradition in the Western Christian rites up until they outlawed. Now this is secular outlawing, not religious, secular, you know. We say there's a separation between church and state, which there isn't, but that's what they say. And the rationale was that the birds were eating the rice and their stomachs were getting bloated and they died. Okay. I got 5 million, whatever those horrible birds are that came in from England. The black ones, I forget what they're called, they're horrid. They got all over there, a mess. So they eat them and they die. I don't think it's a big deal. But I never saw any dead birds. And I was an altar boy, so I saw a lot of weddings. And I never saw any dead birds. But I'm sure that the scientists, whoever promoted this, were telling the truth. And they had the government then supervise the religious aspect of this marriage. Of course, it always meant fertility. Well, if there's anything the governments want today is no fertility, so maybe that's where they were headed. So that was one thing that I saw between ancient India and today's cultural traits, and wanted to bring that up. Another one was that when the marriage ceremony was over, the husband and the wife would get in a special carriage and ride from the church to the husband's house. It could be a couple of miles, 3 miles, 1 mile, who knows, 5 miles, but they would go. And when they went past certain places, they would have to say a little prayer. They had to. They could not do it. They had to do it. And ancient India was all about doing the ritual, doing the ceremony. It wasn't just written down in a book somewhere. It was adhered to. Same thing in the family. All the rituals, all the ceremonies, all the responsibilities that were written down in the sacred text and this, that, and the other thing, they did it. It just wasn't speaking. They actually did it. You know, look at us. If we would say that the Ten Commandments is our civil code, well, we're way gone on that point. Goodness gracious, thou shalt not kill. Everybody's killing everybody. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife. They're all doing that. You know, just turn on the TV. You know what kind of culture this is. So the point is that they would the wagon, whatever it was, that they were being driven to the husband's house. If it went by a cemetery, there was a special prayer they had to say for that. Now we had the same thing when I was growing up. the Catholics, and maybe others, but especially the Catholics, so we're talking the 20th century, okay? For these ancient Indians, we're talking, and I'm not limiting this to this, but we're talking the end of the BC era and the beginning of the AD era, okay? But these rites and ceremonies that I'm reading about in that time frame undoubtedly preceded these by thousands of years. As I said before, it's the most ancient civilization on the planet, and it's ancient because it lived in communities and it had culture. Didn't have writing to begin with, but it had culture, it had community, it had defined cities and towns people lived in, and they were administered to. It was the central government. There were all these things that define civilization. Okay? The one thing they didn't have until, maybe 2000 BC was writing. But they got that eventually. And listen, most ancient civilization on the planet. So others that consider themselves ancient, I would just to be antagonistic, I would say, are they even civilized? But I'm not going to do that, because I don't want to come off as being antagonistic. However, so what did the Catholics have when I was growing up? That go by a cemetery every single time. It was, may the souls of the faithfully departed rest in peace, amen. Followed by the sign of the cross. Always, always, always. I can remember in the Bronx, we were always out in the 56 Chevy, and maybe an earlier car before the 56 Chevy. And we'd go by St. Raymond Cemetery. And we'd always, it's just at least once a week, this was always, may the souls of the faithfully departed rest in peace, amen. And then the sign of the cross. And as I was reading about all of this, I came across a number of other, I want to say that these are kind of like religious pronouncements that were the same. And like, for example, the transmigration of souls. I don't know if I read that there within this context. I could have been reading something about ancient Greece, but the aspect that there would be life after death when reading about ancient India, and certainly talking about a life cycle. So this concept carried through. The other thing I would say is because I only know mostly the Catholic and the Christian thing, I was reading about a particular area of India and their art. I think it was a part of India on the east coast, in the middle, or it could have been the Deccan, D-E-C-A-N, the plateau area. But I think, which is a large plateau that covers much of central and southern India, more to the south than to the north, but it's a large plateau, 2,000 feet, etc., etc. There's something in there, and their religious art, as far as I'm concerned, it was art that Christianity has, at least the Catholics, for the Blessed Virgin, the Mother of God, same colorations, halos, infants, blah, blah, blah. So, after a while, I know you're going to hear me say that Christianity in the form of Catholicism is directly descendant from the Indian religious culture in ancient times. And most writers say that culture is still with India. It hasn't left. It's still there. And the other thing, if you remember, I said that ancient Indian women had a lot of high status, and they were able to be major administrators, scholars, artists, ancient. However, somehow it changed, and in the video that I talked about that, I said, who knows, maybe the men were felt threatened, and they wanted to get their power, totally within their camp. But what I just read, excuse me, is that Buddhism frowns on womanhood. They think women are a weaker grade of humans, and they can't be trusted. They're not reliable. This is with the Buddhists. So perhaps when the Buddhists came around, which probably was shortly after the Buddha himself came to life, which was around 700, 600 BC, 500 BC, but it was no later than 500 BC. So, and after that, the Buddhists, we want men, we don't want women. So it could have came from that. And I don't know what the status is now with Buddhism. I really don't. I've paid no attention to them. When I was in the Navy, they would capture sailors wandering around the streets of San Francisco or anywhere else and bring them into these little services, and they were very strange. So I think I went once, never again. But and I'm not, making any super negative remarks about Buddhism. I'm just simply stating a fact. That's what they did. They ran around the streets of San Francisco. I think they handed out cards with an address on it. I must have had nothing going on that night, so I went in there. But it creeped me out. Let's put it that way. Okay, so I got the two things out I wanted to talk about: the graveyards. May the souls of the faithfully departed rest in peace. Amen. It almost reminds me of the Hounds of Tocqueville or something, the Sherlock Holmes short story. And the ceremonies, the rites, and so on. And with that, I'm going to shut this down because I don't want this to go on and on and on. As you know, I could be talking forever. I'll tell you one other thing. So I'm down in Cape May yesterday, and I come out of Casals shoe store, very fine shoe store. You can actually get good shoes there. You can't get good shoes anywhere else, but in Casals in Cape May you can. So I come out. I told the guy, listen, leave the new shoes on my feet. I want to check them out. So I'm walking. I wasn't two storefronts from Casals, and a lovely bag with the shoebox in it with the old shoes and a few other things. And some people just stopped to talk to me, and right away they took a shine to me. Can you imagine anybody taking a shine to me? But they took a shine to me, and we started talking. And this guy had a significant-looking camera. The man, it was a man and a woman, a significant-looking camera hanging over his shoulder. And as I was talking, he must have got the idea that I was an interesting character because he starts to take a picture. And he does. And I never stopped rambling. I kept on talking, If I get an opportunity, I'm going to talk. But he mentions, he mentions that he's a very avid photographer, and as a matter of fact, he's got a site that's called Lens Cap Mafia, great name, on the Instagram. He says, go see it tomorrow, you'll see a picture up there. And I right away, which I do what everybody said, I don't know anything about that stuff, He was pretty insistent, so I said, listen, I know somebody that knows all about this stuff, so I'll find out. And I haven't done it yet, but I'm going to go to Lens Cap Mafia and go look for myself. Bluebird Semaphore is probably what he's got down. He'll probably say something about running into this character in the Washington Plaza Mall in Cape May. And then he took another picture, so you'll probably have that one. And by the way, if you're listening, Charlie, that's not that guy's name. That's my buddy who knows everything about doing these sorts of things. If you're listening, Charlie, go look at that now instead of waiting for me to tell you, because if you wait for me to do anything, hell will freeze over. So that being said, and I hope YouTube doesn't what do they do now? They censor. I hope they don't censor me for saying what I just said. Oh my goodness, Charlie. You know that they censored me for something else, but I already forgot what that was. Listen, everybody, I hope you had a good listen, and I do hope you come and visit me, especially people with Indian heritage. I'd love for you to go to Bluebird Semaphore, and the last three, which would be 38, 37, 36, have me talking about India. And I know you probably know all about how to deal with YouTube and all these things, but if you specifically, if you see something that's really wrong, you can reply, tell me, Joe, you got this wrong. I already know I got a few things wrong with the Indian perspective. And just let me know. I mean, I always say I'm not a scholar. I'm not putting anything out there that this is all written in stone. What I'm talking about. What I am trying to do is get people to have a larger perspective of history. And I repeat it all the time.